Thank you all for being on. This past weekend I was up in Cleveland for a 100th anniversary of the Metro Parks and also to kick off the 4th annual Velisano bike ride. This is for charity ride. It has grown dramatically every year. I've ridden in it every year. Unfortunately this year the Saturday ride was on a 3-hour rain delay and I had other events I had to go to, including to a memorial for Ralph Regula, who passed away last week. One of my very good friends in the house and a mentor of mine. Had the opportunity to visit with his family and friends and express our condolences. Later today, as some of you know, because you were planning to be there, we had a hearing of the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations that I chair. This was about federal permitting reform and trying to get the Trump administration and Congress working together to put the permitting reform bill in place to implement it aggressively, which reduces red tape so we can more efficiently use the federal dollars to rebuild crumbling infrastructure, boost our economy. This is something that's been very popular among the business community, but also the building trades. And the AFL-CIO building trades strongly supported our bill that I passed with Senator McCaskill back in 2015. And so we're, again, trying to implement it. We believe the Obama administration did not do it effectively, and now we're working with the Trump administration to get this new law in place in a way that really will make a difference in terms of our economy and rebuilding our aging infrastructure. It's called FAST 22, FAST being the acronym for the highway bill that it's in, and 41 being the title of the bill. Unfortunately, I just learned in the last 45 minutes that the Democratic leadership has used a rarely invoked right to block hearings this afternoon. So those of you planning to come to that hearing, we will not hold the hearing. Unfortunately, some witnesses flew in for the hearing, including one from Ohio, who I'll be meeting with. But we hope to reschedule that hearing for next week. And again, this is a hearing that is bipartisan because Senator McCaskill and I are the co-authors of this legislation. On health care, as you know, I voted to begin debate on the health care reform bill yesterday. As I said so many times during this debate, my goal has been to create a more workable health care system for Ohio, one that does lower the cost of coverage and that provides access to quality care, but also protects the most vulnerable in our society. And as I said in my floor speech last night, the status quo is bad for Ohio, and it's unsustainable. Because of the Affordable Care Act, there are a lot of Ohioans who are now facing far higher costs. So we have 19 counties in Ohio without any insurers on the individual market. There are another 27 counties with just one insurer. We've seen a 91% increase in the cost of premiums for individuals, 82% increase in the cost for small businesses, double-digit increase this year, and double-digit increases expected next year. No one can afford that. So I am committed to repealing and replacing status quo with something much better. But I want to do it in the right way. So as you know, throughout this process, I've worked to improve the legislation at every opportunity I've had. I've worked to keep Medicaid expansion whole for 3 more years, and Medicaid expansion on a glide path for another 3 years. That's 6 years in total, in order to give governors and give beneficiaries the time and flexibility to transition to a new health care system. This is a big improvement from the House bill that had no glide path. It had a cliff. I've worked to provide more assistance for lower-income individuals on the tax credit structure under this bill, so the Senate bill is an improvement in that. I've worked to ensure that medically complex kids are excluded from the Medicaid transition to per capita caps. Actually, this will end up saving money to keep these kids in a situation where they are able to get health care they need to reduce future costs. I've worked to add my proposal of an unprecedented $45 billion in new resources for states to ensure those receiving opioid treatment under Medicaid expansion and others will maintain access to treatment as they work to get back on their feet. This $45 billion is unprecedented, as I said. It's also a lot of money for Ohio. If you use the formula that was used under the Cures Act, and the legislation is very similar to the Cures Act, which was $500 million a year, this would be $4.5 billion a year. Ohio would be in line to receive significant funds, probably between $230 and $250 million a year. I've also worked with my colleagues on the Portman Amendment, which we voted on last night. It adds $100 billion in assistance to help low-income Americans get high-quality, affordable health care on the private market. This is something that I've worked on in combination with another part of the amendment, which is to add a Medicaid wraparound that allows states by law to assist low-income individuals with high deductibles and other out-of-pocket costs. So this combination of the $100 billion in the long-term stability fund and then this Medicaid wraparound really helps in Ohio to ensure that low-income individuals, including those currently on expansion who are going to go to the private market, have an opportunity to get affordable health care. And again, all these added up help ensure that these folks have good health care options, whether it's under current Medicaid structure or under the affordable care options in the private market. I also ensured that under the Senate bill that we continue to keep the eligibility for people who are in Medicaid expansion. In other words, there is no change in the eligibility. If the states choose to continue to provide coverage to adults, as an example, who are single without kids, or people up to 138% of poverty, they can do that under the Senate bill. Again, there'll be other options for those people to get out of Medicaid and onto private plans. Those have certain advantages. One is you have a lot more providers who will take private plans. About 40% of providers are not taking Medicaid now. It's the best numbers that we have. And of course, the Medicaid reimbursement is relatively low for our hospitals and other providers in Ohio. So getting people into private plans is helpful to them. They have more options to be able to get to specialists, to be able to have the kind of choices that we want people to have, but also for providers. The most recent version of this Better Care Reconciliation Act, BCRA, was an improvement over the House bill and over the first Senate bill that I had opposed. And again, we've made additional changes since then, including this Portman Amendment that I got a commitment on from our leadership to support, which adds $100 billion in assistance for low-income folks in Ohio and around the country. The replacement I voted for last night, again, included all these changes. It was not perfect. No replacement I've seen is perfect. But it's an improvement over current law and a failed status quo, and that's why I voted for it last night. So as we proceed with further debate on the issue, I'm going to continue to work with my colleagues to ensure that my ideas are included and that our healthcare system can work better for all Ohioans. Yesterday, you saw that the House passed these sanctions on Iran, Russia, and North Korea. It was bipartisan. I hope the Senate will now move quickly to pass the final bill. We had already sent our legislation over to the House. Slight changes made in the House. We didn't get it to the President for signature. We've got to hold these countries accountable for their aggressive and destabilizing behavior. I was at a hearing yesterday on North Korea and talked about this issue and specifically the idea of North Korea once again being considered a country that's on the list of countries that support terrorism. I'm pleased that my language in the House bill to counter Russian propaganda and disinformation is included. These countries actively undermine U.S. allies and interests. In the case of Russia, I believe they did meddle in our election, and this legislation sends a clear signal that their actions have to have consequences. So I'm looking forward to, again, getting this legislation to the President so we can show our allies and our adversaries that we have affirmed the principles of both Iran and North Korea. This Monday, a couple days ago, we got some good news for Ohio jobs and Ohio workers. You may recall that earlier this summer, Senator Brown and I urged the Commerce Department to protect U.S. aluminum extrusion producers who were harmed by unfair trade practices. A lot of these companies are in Ohio. Just this week, the department ruled that Chinese aluminum producers were unfairly circumventing our trade laws, and aluminum producers now are going to get a fair shake. This was able to occur because of two bills. One is called the Level the Playing Field Act, which I co-authored with Sherrod Brown. The other is called the Enforce Act, which I co-authored with Ron Wyden, both of which combined help the ITC and Commerce, the National Trade Commission, and the Commerce Department to get the tools they needed to ensure that our workers in Ohio get relief. And so this is a a case in point where our legislation is making a difference in Ohio, in this case, with regard to workers who are in the aluminum business. I'll continue to work to ensure that our Ohio workers are protected from those who don't play by the rules. That's the idea. We got some good news this morning. We just had a markup in the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee. We passed two of my common sense bipartisan bills. One reduces paperwork and costs in the federal government, and one allows government workers, anybody in the TSP, Thrift Savings Plan, to get the same options the rest of us will get in the 401k. And by the way, this will result in more savings and a better system in modernizing the TSP system. And this is with Senator Carper. I'm hoping that legislation and the paperwork reduction legislation can go to the floor of the Senate and be passed by unanimous consent and get those signed into law. With that, looking for your questions or comments on anything.
Senator Jack Shorey, two questions. Are you going to vote on the repeal bill today, which just strictly repeals the 2010 law? Are you going to vote yes? And second of all, you were talking about your amendment last night, but I thought it got defeated.
Yeah, it got 43 votes, so it did not pass the 60-vote margin, but it got the support of our leadership, the support of the administration, which I got commitments on before I voted on the motion to proceed, as you know.
Yeah.
And my hope is that in the eventual bill, that there will be a process with the House that it will be included. We're still in the process of getting the score from the Congressional Budget Office. That has been frustrating, as you can imagine, because it's taking longer than we'd hoped. They've been distracted by other scores that they had to come up with. So we think we'll get a score soon, and we'll get that score. We think there's a shot we can get it in the Senate side bill with a 50-vote margin rather than a 60-vote margin. And if not, we can now have a strong vote to be able to say that this should be in the House-Senate conference.
And how are you going to vote today at 11:30?
What's that, Jack?
How are you going to vote today? I think the strictly only repeal bill is on.
I don't support only repeal. I support repeal and replace. If you repealed only, it would be disastrous for Ohio. The landscape has changed entirely since 2015. Back then, we had a competitive market in Ohio. We had multiple insurance companies in every county. Now we don't. We've got 19 counties without a single insurer. We've got 27 counties with only one insurer. We've got more and more Ohioans who are facing higher costs and much fewer choices. Every expert I've talked to has said if you just did repeal and kick the can down the road and didn't roll up your sleeves and do replace, if more insurance companies would leave Ohio, if the people in these 19 counties would get no relief, obviously.
So you will vote no on this?
Yeah, I mean, I've made that clear. That's not new. That's not news.
Senator, this is Deirdre from the Enquirer. It looks like the end goal here now is this idea of a skinny repeal, sort of anything that can get 50 votes so the Senate can get to conference. Is that a good strategy? Do you support that?
Well, we'll see what's in it. I don't know what skinny means. I've heard about 10 different definitions of that. Obviously, I'd like to see some of my provisions included in any skinny version, but I'd have to look at it.
Well, I think if we're talking about the lowest common denominator, so just repealing the individual mandate, the employer mandate, and the medical device tax. Is that something you would support? And what do you think that would do to insurance markets and premiums?
Well, I don't know that it would have much effect because I assume that under that scenario, it would all be about the conference. In other words, we would go into conference with the House and come out with a more comprehensive bill that dealt with the issues we have to deal with to get insurance companies back to Ohio, to let people know who are facing this unbelievable dilemma now where they've got to move out of their county in order to get health insurance. It's crazy. So I would think, Deirdre, that would be in the context of a House committing to doing a conference with the Senate to have a broader bill come back to both chambers. And
so it sounds like you're open to it.
Yeah, I mean, I need to know that there's a commitment to do that in that case. And the scenario you've laid out, which I don't know, frankly, if that's where people are headed, would mean that the Medicaid program as it stands would be status quo. In other words, there'd be no changes to Medicaid expansion, as an example. So I would need to look at it and see what it says.
So I just want to jump in one last question about the president's decision on transgender people being unable to serve in the military. Do you support that?
Well, I'm just learning about it kind of, frankly, just before this call. I just saw the tweet that someone sent me. I'm confused by it because my understanding was that Secretary of Defense Mattis had just put in place, I think, a couple months ago, a 6-month policy review on this, and by the end of the year we were going to get the input from the military, and I think we should let the military decide this.
Senator David Skolnick from the Vindicator.
Hey, David.
Yesterday during Trump's rally here in Youngstown, he said that he had driven past former steel plants in the city and said that those jobs had left Ohio and that they're all coming back. We're going to fill up those factories and rip them down and build brand new ones. That's what's going to happen. How likely do you think it is for a return of glory days of steel to the Ohio Valley?
Well, I strongly support that. I mean, I just talked earlier about the Level Playing Field Act and the Enforce Act. We continue to want the administration to aggressively implement these bills. I had the new Customs nominee in my office recently, who's the acting Customs and Border Protection Director, and his office is the one that should be, in my view, enforcing the Enforce Act even more. That would help to bring back steel jobs to Ohio. So we've made progress. We just won 3 steel cases to the folks that, I don't know if he was talking about, the 2 producers like Valoric or others in the valley where I visited. We need a stronger energy market. We need a stronger economy, so there's more demand for energy products, and that would help them to be able to have more opportunities. So it's a combination of ensuring that the trade policies are fair. This new legislation is making a difference. We're winning cases. We're bringing jobs back. It's a question of ensuring that we get this economy moving. Tax reform, regulatory relief, the things we talked about on worker retraining, infrastructure improvements. All this would help, David, to be able to have more markets out there. I was with a bunch of steel folks yesterday from Ohio. This was ArcelorMittal, Nucor, U.S. Steel, and they were making the point that if we can get tax reform done and the infrastructure bill going, that will create a lot more markets for them, and they'll add more jobs in Ohio and begin to, if not build new plants, at least fill the existing plants. We got a capacity problem in the valley. In other words, we can do more with existing plants, and so I think it's a combination of things, and yeah, I think we can definitely bring back more steel jobs to Ohio.
Senator Steve Koff from Cleveland.com, you've mentioned the conference committee a couple of times now. Could you explain what your expectation is for the time frame and how this moves forward beyond this week, when we might see then a conference report, when this might actually go for final passage?
Steve, you're asking a question that many of my colleagues are also asking. I got to be honest. I don't think anybody knows for sure. It's up to leadership. It depends on the votes, obviously, how things go this week. I suppose there's a scenario where it could get done, by late this week or this weekend in terms of a final product. It would go right to the House, and then a conference process would have to begin. In other words, you have to have a vote on the conferees in the House and the Senate, and then you set up a conference. I don't know who would be on the conference committee, and then you begin the process. So I think it would take a little while, and that gives us a chance, by the way, to score our amendment that does this Medicaid wraparound for private plans. It also does the $100 billion for the long-term stability fund that helps low-income Ohioans be able to afford their insurance. So that gives us time to get our score in, which we think will take about another week. So I don't know. I would guess, this would transpire, over the next few weeks.
And since there's a vacation or a break scheduled in August, are we talking about this entire debate continuing into the fall?
I don't know. It depends, again, on what happens. I know we're in this week, next week, and the week after on the current schedule. So that might be adequate time, or it might be that they work on it during August, during the work